I really believe that it enhances our walk with God when we're generous. I think not outgiving God and the more you give, the more you receive. I mean, I think all those things are true. They're not the reason to do it. Reasons include things like setting an example for your friends and your children. Reasons would include developing a trust in God. You decide to give 20% of your revenue away, you better hope somebody's helping cover your back.
That is the voice of Rob Fairley, president of the United Methodist Foundation of Louisiana. As you know, or may not know if you're new to the podcast, the foundation supports the Louisiana NOW podcast. I remember sharing the idea that I had for starting a podcast for the Louisiana Conference with Rob, and before I could even finish my description of all that would be needed, Rob asked, "What do you need? How can I help?" The foundation is a tremendous resource for churches in Louisiana, and we thought you'd enjoy this interview. Thought maybe you would enjoy hearing all that the foundation is up to and how the foundation can help you at your local setting. We also thought you'd enjoy listening to Rob's passion. Without further ado, my interview with Rob Fairley. Well, Rob, thanks for joining us on the podcast that the United Methodist Foundation of Louisiana supports.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Well, we do, so thank you for your support of the podcast. I guess one of the first questions I have for you is a really simple one, probably one you get a lot. What is the foundation? What is it that the foundation does for the churches in the Louisiana Conference?
Well, that is a good basic question. The Book of Discipline, the foundation of our church throughout the years, didn't say anything about foundations until just a few years before we were founded. We were established in 1975, so we've been around a while, but we were kind of a teenager in the world of Methodist foundations. There are probably 45 around the country. And the one here in Louisiana is, I don't know, about the fourth or fifth largest in the entire denomination, even though it's probably one of the newer in comparison. The Book of Discipline has a real simple description, and it suggests, doesn't require that annual conferences have foundations. Ours chose to do that, I suppose. And it says that the main purpose of foundations is to encourage planned giving, legacy-type giving, so wills and estate plans and that type of thing. But it has a little extra thing that says, and whatever else needs to be done. So our first truly active director was a guy named Jimmy Carraway. Jimmy was a longtime pastor here in the conference, and at the time this all started, he was the conference treasurer, so he was already managing some money. I am getting to your question. So he started out, since he was already responsible for that, utilizing the foundation to manage the money of the annual conference, and it began to expand and offer those things to other churches. So we manage money for the churches, and the annual conference is one of our clients. We loan money to churches. We have an advantage as a nonprofit in that we don't pay taxes, so we don't charge points or origination fees. We can usually be counted on to be the best option for a loan for a church. We do what the Book of Discipline said we're supposed to. We work with individuals to help them understand how they can make a legacy or leave a legacy, make a gift to their church to carry on in the future. And probably the most fun thing that we do that started in earnest maybe in the last 10 years is we give money away. And I'd be glad to talk to you about, in fact, I want to talk to you probably about each one of those things. So lead me.
Well, let's start with the legacy giving.
Okay.
How important is it to leave a legacy? We hear that all the time. How important is that, and how does that process work for someone who may be considering this may be an opportunity or a time for me to leave a legacy?
I think it's important in an individual's life. It's, of course, also important in the institution's life. I think showing what is important to you is probably most simply exemplified by the way you use your money. So giving is important. But from a leaving the legacy standpoint, it's a kind of a different pocket is the old phrase that's used. Most of us give to our churches from our income, our salary or our commissions or whatever it is it may be. A legacy usually comes from accumulated assets. So God blesses us all of our lives. We accumulate things for our retirement and to help our children after we're gone. And we should also remember that we could help our church and our faith after we're gone. So that's the importance of it.
And obviously there's a difference between legacy giving and traditional giving that maybe most people who are listening to this podcast are giving to their churches every Sunday. Why is, and I don't mean to kind of pin you down on this, but you get this question a lot. You're about money. This is what you do. Why is giving, why is that important to one's faith?
I think it's an extraordinarily important part of our faith journey. I grew up in a Christian family, a Methodist family. My parents were married down the street at First Methodist, so I was just kind of brought up in that tradition. But the first part of my life was spent in a secular career, a couple different places. So I come from that position. Somebody could probably, if they knew me well, call me a capitalist. I am. I believe in free enterprise. They would probably observe me as a relatively conservative from certainly the business practice standpoint. So given that as a base, I think it's really important that we consider how money impacts our faith. It is how we value everything in our lives. We live in the nicest house we can make the mortgage payment on. We send our kids to the best school our money can pay for. We take the job that offers the most money. Money goes all through our culture. We're a materialistic culture. So if we think it's valuable for schools or houses or jobs, and that's how we value that, why do we not think it's how we should also react with God? Who is, if we believe what I think we're supposed to believe, that God's the creator of everything and gives us everything we have, why would we not think giving part of it back is not important? So I personally believe if we're really saying God's first in our lives, our money for God should also be first in our lives.
You at the foundation, and the foundation itself is equipped and ready to help pastors and lay people inside the churches of Louisiana talk about giving, talk about how this not only planned gifts, but giving as a whole. Tell the folks at home all the different resources that you have. And if you've been paying attention to the Louisiana NOW podcast, we've been talking about for instance, one of the things, the planned giving Navigator, which you're going to pick up the cost on something that is a tremendous asset for churches in Louisiana.
Well, in regard to that, one of the challenges we have in working with churches, first of all, there are just 3 of us are actually out there in the churches individually. We're a relatively small staff, but there are 3 of us that are out in the field, so to speak. We're the ones who are willing to preach and come in and work with the finance committees and so on. We broach the subject of this planned giving concept, but it's not a real simple one. It's not even as simple as saying we ought to tithe. There's more to it. And so one of our challenges has been able to get in front of enough people to communicate and to be able to communicate the complexity. And, you don't need an extra college degree to understand it, but you need to sit down and hear about it and think about it a little bit. If you're giving part of the assets you've been blessed with, but you've taken a lifetime to accumulate, it's an important point. And so you need to do it in the best possible way. Planned Giving Navigator is something that was developed actually by someone else away from the foundation who we learned about and got to know. And he was in a job similar to ours for another denomination and had the same struggle. How do you reach out to people? How do you educate them? How do you encourage them? So he kind of developed something for himself. And we thought it was so good that we worked out a deal with him, and he was willing to share it with us. So it's a combination of things. It utilizes some of the materials already at the church, the website, pictures, and so forth. It can utilize the email list in the church. It can pull all this together it can even tie into the calendar so that an endowment committee chairperson can use it to set a meeting, notify all their members, and produce some collateral material, some brochures with pictures of their very own church in order to communicate all this to their members throughout the church. There is some cost involved with it, and what we say is come sign up. You pay half the cost, we'll pay half the cost, and at the end of a year, if you've really given it a fair shot and you don't think it was worthwhile, we'll give you your money back. So the cost is not very much. It depends a little bit on the size of the church, but it maxes out at $500, so $250 for a church, $250 for us. We've only had one church come to us and ask for their money back, and they said it was not through any disappointment of the material they received, but because they were doing something else and they needed every dollar they had. So I hope they will come back and join us.
Some other programs that you're involved in, or not involved in, but churches can get involved in with the foundation include the endowment match program. estate planning course, and Financial Peace University, which I'm a graduate of the Financial Peace University. I don't walk around with the envelopes, but I was able to capture some of it, my wife and I, a tremendous program. You love what you're doing.
I do, and have for 20 plus years.
Why is that?
Well, it allowed me to kind of take advantage of my background in education and business experience and my love of God and the church, and combine those interests and talents. I find that a lot of the practical financial knowledge that we're forced to have in the secular world is missing in our spiritual realm. I'm talking about our local churches. So it was an area of need that I felt like we could address. The two people besides me that go out and visit the churches, as I was describing, Bob Carroll in the north, Chris Spencer down here in the south, both have financial backgrounds. Both are lifelong Methodists. Both have a passion for connecting faith and money. In fact, our tagline for the foundation is, where faith and money come together.
And you, not only do you love what you're doing, which is evident in your answer and your life ministry at the foundation, but you kind of sat up in your chair when you said you give away money. Now, this is not to say that Rob Fairley is going to just, start handing out money, but I have a feeling when you are able to help a ministry inside the conference, that is really what gives you. That's really what excites you.
It is the most fun part of the work that we do. So let me tell you how that kind of came about. I'm driving back from a sermon, and that's something we do, and churches ask us to preach, and we do that regularly, and you'll be amazed at this, but they usually ask us to come talk about money and giving. I think that's maybe because they're a little nervous about it, and we can be very bold and get in our car and go home. Nobody can chase after us.
I've heard you preach about more than just money, and you, my friend, can preach.
Well, thank you. But I was coming back from a money-type sermon and having one of those conversations in my mind that probably we all have, and it was on the two sides. So on one side, I was saying, next time I preach about this, I ought to do this better or that better or leave this out, and I really ought to focus on first fruits giving. And the other side of my brain was saying, okay, now tomorrow we're going to sit down and have a budget meeting. It was in the fall. So how have we done this year, and what can we plan for next year? And I thought to myself, we've had a pretty good year. We'll probably have some money left over. We ought to give it away. Now, next time I preach, I've really got to focus on this first fruits giving. And if we have any money left over, we ought to give it away. I almost ran off the road into a ditch because those conflict. I was thinking of preaching one thing, and the organization I was leading was doing another. So I went back the next day. We sat down and decided that we had to have a little integrity. So we changed our budgeting process. Specifically, our first line item in our budget is what we give away. So at first I said we need to give away the biblical minimum of 10% of our gross revenues. I don't think I said earlier, but we are totally self-sufficient. We've never received the first apportionment dollar. We've been blessed in a variety of ways, but this is truly the money that we could choose to spend however.
Sure.
And then I thought, wait a minute, what did I just say? Biblical minimum. That didn't sound very generous. So we ought to double that. So we give away 20% of our gross operating revenues. Those are dollars we generate through our various activities that go to support our budget. We take 20% of our projected revenues, set it aside for our grant program, and then we find a way to live off the rest, which is what most Americans have to do with their income.
Wow. You kind of threw me for a loop. I'm speechless. That's a great story.
Let me tell you a little bit about what we do with it. We started out years even prior to this. We started trying to help people go to seminary.
Right.
So we provide this service loan grant, and basically we help you pay for some of your seminary bills. And at the end of that time, if you come back to the state of Louisiana and serve a church under appointment, then we'll forgive 20% a year. So over 5 years, you kind of work yourself out of the loan, and it becomes a grant. Spread it out over 5 years, get you convicted of crawfish, and also tax-wise, it spreads out recognizing that income. Right. So we did that, and we have funded some leadership development programs. We invented and funded something we call LEAP, which was for leadership development. We heard of a program called Apple, and so we funded people to participate in that, and we've done some others, not to belabor the point. So leadership development has been very important. We've also responded to some more specific needs. We contributed a couple of trucks to the disaster recovery team. More recently, admiring the work Gloria was doing here with church revitalization and so forth, and realizing she had some budgetary limitations, we made a grant that over the last year or so has actually helped to fund 2 people that help her carry out her mission. So we have some guidelines that we have to follow. We do have a grants committee, and they approve things. Rob's not out here just doling out money, but it really is exciting.
When you visit with a pastor, and you visit with pastors all the time about some of the different programs and your ability to interface with them and what's available for them, I imagine that dealing with the budget of a church is a tricky thing at times. It can be overwhelming for some pastors who are fresh out of seminary and have never had any business classes. It can be intimidating. It can be complicated. A lot of pastors really, really know theology and know how to speak about God and not as much about the business nature of church. What would be your message to pastors who maybe struggle with that?
Be bold.
Be bold.
And
okay.
if it's difficult for you to be bold about this topic, perhaps because you don't have a lot of experience or knowledge about it, call us and let us come. I think we all feel very similar. We are passionate about this. I really believe that it enhances our walk with God when we're generous. I think not outgiving God and the more you give, the more you receive. I think all those things are true. They're not the reason to do it. Reasons include things like setting an example for your friends and your children. Reasons would include developing a trust in God. You decide to give 20% of your revenue away, you better hope somebody's helping cover your back. They're just untold number of benefits from becoming generous. And so call us, let us come say those things to your committee or to your people, and let us make some of the statements that might be difficult for the clergy person who receives their paycheck from that group of people to say, but yet needs to be said.
Rob, thank you for your time today, and thank you for supporting the Louisiana Now podcast. We think this is a great venue to share news, opportunities, and witness of the Louisiana Conference with everyone, whether it's a church member or a pastor. So thank you for your support, and thanks for all that you do. If you would like more information on the United Methodist Foundation, you can visit their website. It's really simple, umf.org. Rob Fairley, thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Thanks again to the Foundation for supporting the Louisiana Now podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode and would like to help us produce more, you can help us by sharing and subscribing. Share this on your social media feeds and subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcast. And if you're so inclined to leave us a review, hopefully a positive review, we would love that, because the more reviews, the more positive reviews we get, the higher the podcast will be featured and easier to find. So that is really important. So if you're listening and enjoy us, please leave us a review. The Louisiana Now podcast is produced by Mary Burley. We thank her for all of her time. And once again, thank you for joining us. May the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.